The baby's cries pierced through the silence at 3 in the morning like a fire alarm that wouldn't stop. Jessica Mitchell jolted awake in her small apartment bedroom, her heart already racing before her feet hit the cold hardwood floor. 6-month-old Lily had been crying for 2 hours straight, her tiny face red and scrunched with pain from the colic that no doctor seemed able to fix. Jessica stumbled toward the crib, her exhausted body moving on autopilot after 3 straight days of barely any sleep. Behind her, she heard dresser drawers slamming open and closed with angry force. David was packing again. Her husband had been threatening to leave for weeks now, ever since Lily's crying had gotten worse instead of better. Jessica picked up her screaming daughter, bouncing her gently while whispering soft reassurances that seemed to fall on deaf ears. The baby's cries only grew louder, more desperate, as if she sensed the tension filling their tiny 2-bedroom apartment like poison gas. "I can't do this anymore, Jessica." David's voice cut through Lily's wails like a knife. Jessica turned to see him shoving clothes into his old college duffel bag with rough, impatient movements. His dark hair was messy from sleep, but his eyes were wide awake and cold as winter stones. "The crying never stops. She's been sick for months, and nothing we do helps. I never signed up for this." Jessica felt her throat close up with panic and exhaustion. "She's your daughter too, David. She can't help being sick. The doctor said some babies just have worse colic than others. It'll get better when she's older." Her voice cracked on the last words as Lily's screaming reached a pitch that made her ears ring. She had said these same words so many times over the past month that they felt hollow and useless now. David zipped up his bag with a violent motion that made Jessica flinch. "Find someone else to play daddy. I'm done with this whole mess. I'm done with her constant crying. I'm done with no sleep. I'm done with you looking like death warmed over every single day." He grabbed his jacket from the chair and headed toward the bedroom door without looking back at his wife or child. "David, please don't go." Jessica followed him down the narrow hallway, still holding Lily, who was now crying so hard she was starting to turn blue around the lips. "We can figure this out together. Maybe we can find a different doctor, try some new medicine. Please don't leave us." Her voice broke completely on the word us, and she hated how desperate and weak she sounded. He stopped at the front door and finally turned to look at her, but there was no love or warmth left in his face. Only irritation and something that looked almost like disgust. "Look at yourself, Jessica. When's the last time you showered? When's the last time you combed your hair or put on clean clothes? You've turned into some crazy person who can't even keep a baby quiet. I married a woman, not a zombie mother who can't handle basic parenting." The words hit Jessica like physical blows. She looked down at her stained pajama shirt and realized he was right about her appearance. She couldn't remember the last time she had looked in a mirror or cared about anything beyond keeping Lily fed and trying to stop her crying. "I'm doing my best," she whispered, but David was already opening the door. "Your best isn't good enough." He stepped out into the cold night air, and Jessica heard his car engine start before the door even closed behind him. She stood there in her empty living room, holding her still crying baby, listening to the sound of his tires on the wet pavement as he drove away from their life together. The silence that followed felt even louder than Lily's cries. Jessica sank onto their old couch, still bouncing Lily automatically while tears started rolling down her own cheeks. She had known their marriage was struggling since Lily was born, but she never thought David would actually abandon them completely. What kind of man walked away from his own sick child? The next 3 days passed like a nightmare Jessica couldn't wake up from. Lily's crying got worse instead of better, and Jessica found herself calling David's phone over and over, begging him through voicemails to come home and help her figure out what to do. He never answered, and eventually his phone started going straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. On the 4th morning, Jessica found an eviction notice taped to her door. Without David's income from his construction job, she couldn't afford the rent on their apartment. Her part-time waitressing job at the Prairie Rose Diner barely covered groceries and utilities, let alone the $800 they owed for rent. She had exactly $43 in her checking account and a baby who needed medical care she couldn't afford. Jessica called her mother in Ohio, swallowing her pride completely. "Mom, I need help. David left, and Lily's still sick, and I'm about to lose our apartment." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Jessica thought the call had dropped. "I told you not to marry that boy," her mother finally said in a cold voice that held no sympathy at all. "I told you he wasn't reliable, but you wouldn't listen. Now you want me to clean up your mess? You made your bed, Jessica Elizabeth. You can lie in it." The line went dead. That afternoon, Jessica loaded Lily into her ancient Honda Civic and drove to the emergency room when the baby started having trouble breathing during one of her crying fits. The doctor who examined Lily was kind but direct about the diagnosis. She has severe gastroesophageal reflux disease. Without surgery to fix it, she'll continue having these episodes, and they could get worse. The procedure costs about $15,000, but most insurance plans cover it. Jessica felt her world crashing down around her ears. She didn't have insurance. David had been covered through his construction company, but when he left, he took their health benefits with him. $15,000 might as well have been $15 million. She was a single mother with no family support, no savings, and no way to help her suffering child. Walking out of that hospital with Lily still crying in her arms, Jessica had never felt more alone or hopeless in her entire life. She had no idea that someone had been watching her struggle from the shadows, and that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. 3 weeks after David left, Jessica had fallen into a routine that barely qualified as surviving. Every morning at 5:30, she would strap Lily into her car seat and drive to the Prairie Rose Diner, where she worked double shifts whenever possible. The owner, Mrs. Henderson, had taken pity on her situation and allowed Jessica to bring Lily to work as long as the baby stayed quiet and didn't bother the customers. That's when Jessica first noticed him really watching her. Caleb Morrison had been coming to the diner every morning at 6 o'clock for as long as she'd worked there. But now she realized he wasn't just another regular customer grabbing breakfast before heading out to work his cattle ranch. He was studying her with those quiet gray eyes, taking in every detail of her increasingly desperate situation. Caleb was the kind of man who commanded attention without saying a word. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore clean work clothes and boots that had seen plenty of honest labor but were always well-maintained. His dark hair was usually hidden under a worn cowboy hat, and he had the kind of weathered face that spoke of long days working outdoors under the Montana sun. What struck Jessica most was how he carried himself with quiet confidence, like a man who had never doubted his place in the world. Every morning, Caleb ordered the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and crispy bacon. He always left a $20 tip on a $12 meal, which Jessica desperately needed but felt guilty accepting. He rarely spoke beyond please and thank you, but she noticed he stayed longer when Lily was fussing, as if his presence somehow helped calm the baby's cries. The other diner regulars had plenty to say about Caleb Morrison. Old Pete, who came in for coffee and gossip every afternoon, told Jessica that Caleb had inherited a small, struggling ranch when his parents died in a car accident 15 years ago. Boy was only 20 years old, but he worked like a man possessed, Pete said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Built that place up from nothing into one of the most successful cattle operations in 3 counties. Never married, though. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's good people. Helped me fix my barn roof last summer without being asked. Wouldn't take a penny for it. Jessica found herself looking forward to Caleb's quiet presence each morning, even though they barely exchanged more than polite pleasantries. There was something steady and reliable about him that made her feel slightly less alone in the world. When Lily would start crying during his breakfast, Caleb never looked annoyed or impatient like other customers did. Instead, He would sometimes make funny faces at the baby or tap his spoon gently against his coffee cup in a rhythm that seemed to soothe her. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Jessica's ancient Honda Civic refused to start in the diner parking lot. She had just finished her shift and was loading Lily into the car seat when the engine made a horrible grinding noise and died completely. Jessica turned the key again and again, but nothing happened except a clicking sound that meant her worst fears were coming true. She sat there in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard through tears of frustration and panic. The car repair would probably cost more money than she had, and without transportation, she couldn't get to work or take Lily to her medical appointments. She was so focused on her growing despair that she didn't notice Caleb approaching her car until he tapped gently on the passenger window. "Pop the hood," he said in his quiet voice when she rolled down the window. Without waiting for permission, Caleb walked around to the front of her car and began examining the engine with practiced hands. Jessica watched him work, noticing how his movements were efficient and sure, like a man who had fixed plenty of broken things in his life. "Battery terminals are corroded and your alternator belt is cracked," Caleb said after a few minutes. "I can get it running enough to get you home, but you'll need some work done soon." He produced a small toolkit from his truck and spent the next 20 minutes cleaning connections and adjusting parts. When he told her to try starting it again, the Honda coughed to life with a grateful rumble. "Thank you so much," Jessica said, rolling down her window as Caleb packed up his tools. "I don't know how I can repay you for this." She meant it sincerely. His simple kindness had probably saved her job and her ability to care for Lily. Caleb studied her face for a long moment, and Jessica felt like he was seeing straight through to all her fears and struggles. "You don't owe me anything," he said finally, "but I've been watching you these past few weeks, and I can see you're in trouble. Real trouble, not just a broken-down car." Jessica felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had tried so hard to maintain her dignity and not let her desperation show, but apparently she had fooled no one. "I'm managing," she said quietly, which was a lie and they both knew it. "No, you're not." Caleb's voice was gentle but firm. "You're working double shifts, you've lost weight you can't afford to lose, and that baby needs medical care you can't pay for. I heard you on the phone yesterday, trying to beg money from someone who hung up on you." The truth of his words hit Jessica like a physical blow. She had thought she was being discreet when she called her sister in California, pleading for help with Lily's medical bills. Apparently, Caleb had been close enough to overhear the entire humiliating conversation, including the part where her sister told her that helping Jessica would be enabling her poor life choices. "I have a proposition for you," Caleb said, leaning against her car door with his arms crossed. "You need help, and I need a wife." Jessica stared at him in shock, wondering if she had heard him correctly. "Excuse me?" "Not that kind of wife," Caleb said quickly, and Jessica realized she must have looked horrified. "A business arrangement. Marriage on paper. Nothing more unless you decide different somewhere down the line. You get my name, my health insurance, a stable home for your daughter. I get someone to share that big empty house, cook decent meals, maybe help with the books." Jessica's mind was reeling. Was this man seriously proposing marriage to her in a diner parking lot? "You don't even know me," she managed to say. "I know enough," Caleb replied. "I know you work harder than anyone I've ever seen. I know you're a good mother who would do anything for that baby. I know you're honest because you could have stolen from the till a dozen times when Mrs. Henderson wasn't looking, but you never did. And I know you're desperate enough to consider an offer that probably sounds crazy." He was right about that last part. The offer did sound completely insane, but Jessica couldn't deny that it also sounded like the answer to every prayer she'd been too proud to say out loud. Health insurance for Lily's surgery, a stable home, protection from the world that seemed determined to grind her down into nothing. "What would you get out of this arrangement?" Jessica asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Caleb looked away toward the mountains in the distance, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression showed something raw and lonely. I get a reason to fix up that house my mother always wanted to see full of family. I get someone to cook for besides myself. Maybe someone to talk to besides the cattle. He met her eyes again. And maybe I get to help raise a little girl who needs a father, since her real one was fool enough to walk away. The kindness in his voice when he mentioned Lily made Jessica's throat close up with unexpected emotion. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Yeah, it is," Caleb agreed. "But crazy might be exactly what you need right now. Think about it tonight. If you decide yes, meet me at the courthouse tomorrow at 10 in the morning. If you decide no, I'll still help you get your car fixed properly, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened." He walked back to his truck and drove away, leaving Jessica sitting in her running car with Lily sleeping peacefully in the back seat for the first time in weeks. As she watched his taillights disappear down the highway, Jessica realized that for the first time since David left, she had something that felt almost like hope. Jessica spent the entire night pacing her small apartment with Lily in her arms, weighing Caleb's impossible offer against her rapidly shrinking options. By sunrise, she had made a list of pros and cons on the back of an unpaid electric bill, but the numbers didn't matter as much as the simple fact that Lily needed surgery and Jessica needed help she couldn't find anywhere else. At 7 in the morning, she called Caleb's number, which Mrs. Henderson had quietly written on a napkin and slipped to her the day before. "I'll meet you at the courthouse," Jessica said when Caleb answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for her call. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Caleb replied in that calm, steady voice that was already becoming familiar to her. "Separate bedrooms until I decide otherwise. I keep working at the diner until I'm sure this arrangement will work out. Lily comes first in every decision, always. And if either of us wants out after a year, we could divorce with no hard feelings and no financial claims on each other." Jessica had rehearsed these conditions all night, trying to protect herself and Lily from another abandonment. "Agreed," Caleb said without hesitation. "I'll bring the paperwork for adding you and Lily to my health insurance. We can get that filed today so Lily can have her surgery as soon as possible." 3 hours later, Jessica found herself standing in the courthouse wearing her only clean dress, holding Lily while Caleb spoke quietly with the justice of the peace about marriage licenses and witness requirements. Mrs. Henderson had closed the diner early to come serve as a witness, along with Caleb's ranch foreman, a weathered man named Bill who kept grinning at the whole situation like it was the best entertainment he'd seen in years. The ceremony itself lasted less than 10 minutes. Judge Martinez read the standard vows while Jessica and Caleb stood awkwardly apart, both holding Lily between them like a bridge connecting two strangers. When the judge said, "You may kiss the bride," Caleb extended his hand for a formal handshake instead, which Jessica appreciated more than she could say. This was a business arrangement, not a romance, and she was grateful he understood that distinction. After signing all the legal paperwork, Caleb surprised Jessica by pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Every wife should have a wedding ring," he said simply, opening the box to reveal a plain gold band that looked like it had been purchased that morning. "It doesn't mean anything beyond making this look legitimate to the outside world." Jessica slipped the ring onto her finger, surprised by how perfectly it fit. "Thank you," she said, meaning it. Even in a marriage of convenience, Caleb was trying to do things properly and preserve her dignity. The drive to Caleb's ranch took 20 minutes through rolling hills and open countryside that Jessica had never seen before, despite living in the area for 2 years. Lily fell asleep in her new car seat, which Caleb had installed in his truck that morning with the efficiency of a man who planned ahead for everything. Jessica stared out the window at the vast landscape, wondering what she had gotten herself into and whether she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Caleb's house sat on a rise overlooking thousands of acres of grazing land. A large 2-story structure built from local stone and timber that looked like it had grown naturally from the Montana soil. A wide front porch wrapped around the entire building, and Jessica could see a barn and several outbuildings in the distance. It was the kind of home she had dreamed about as a little girl, but never imagined she would actually live in. "It's beautiful," Jessica said as Caleb carried her single suitcase up the front steps. Everything she and Lily owned fit into 2 bags and a diaper box, which felt embarrassing compared to the solid prosperity of Caleb's ranch. "My father built the foundation when I was a kid," Caleb said, unlocking the front door. "After he and my mother died, I added the second floor and expanded the kitchen. Always figured someday there would be a family to fill all these rooms." Inside, the house was clean and well-maintained, but clearly decorated by a man who cared more about function than beauty. The furniture was sturdy and comfortable, the walls were mostly bare, and everything felt temporary, as if Caleb had been waiting for someone else to make it into a real home. Jessica could picture exactly what the space could become, with curtains, family photos, and the kind of small touches that turn a house into a place where people actually lived. Caleb showed her to a large bedroom on the ground floor that connected to a smaller room he had hastily converted into a nursery. "I bought some baby furniture yesterday," he said, gesturing toward a new crib, changing table, and rocking chair that still had price tags attached. "I wasn't sure what Lily would need, so I probably bought too much." Jessica walked into the nursery and felt tears prick her eyes. In the past 24 hours, this virtual stranger had not only married her and put her on his health insurance, but he had also spent his own money creating a safe, comfortable space for her daughter. The crib was high quality and expensive, the kind Jessica had looked at in stores but never dreamed of being able to afford. "This is perfect," Jessica said, running her hand along the smooth wood of the crib rail. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did," Caleb replied quietly. "If Lily is going to live here, she deserves a proper room." That first evening, they established a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Jessica cooked dinner using ingredients from Caleb's well-stocked kitchen, while he sat at the dining room table, going over ranch paperwork and occasionally making faces at Lily, who seemed fascinated by his deep voice and gentle manner. The baby, who had cried constantly in their cramped apartment, was calm and content in the spacious ranch house, as if she too sensed the stability and safety of their new environment. After dinner, Caleb excused himself to check on the cattle, leaving Jessica alone to explore her new home and get Lily settled for the night. She found herself opening kitchen cabinets and drawers, marveling at the abundance of everything from spices to cleaning supplies. Caleb's kitchen was better equipped than most restaurants, and Jessica realized she could actually enjoy cooking again instead of just trying to feed Lily and herself as cheaply as possible. When Caleb returned from his evening chores, he found Jessica in the living room with Lily, reading one of the children's books she had discovered on a shelf near the fireplace. "Those were mine when I was little," Caleb said, settling into a chair across from them. "My mother read them to me every night until I was old enough to read them myself. Lily loves being read to," Jessica said, adjusting the baby on her lap. "It's one of the few things that calms her down when she's fussy." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the crackling fire Caleb had built and Lily's contented babbling as she played with her fingers. Jessica found herself studying Caleb's profile in the firelight, trying to understand what kind of man would offer marriage to a desperate stranger and then go out of his way to make her comfortable in his home. "Why are you really doing this?" Jessica asked suddenly, the question that had been bothering her all day finally coming to the surface. Caleb was quiet for so long that Jessica thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I built this place for a family I thought I'd have someday. 5 years passed, then 10, then 15. I started to think maybe I was meant to live here alone forever. Then I saw you at the diner, working so hard to take care of Lily, and I thought maybe we could help each other get what we both need." "What do you need?" Jessica asked softly. Caleb looked at her directly for the first time all day, and Jessica saw a loneliness in his gray eyes that matched her own. "I need to matter to someone," he said simply. I need to come home to people who are glad to see me. I need to fix things and build things and protect things that are worth protecting. Jessica felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of kindness that went deeper than just helping a stranger in trouble. Caleb Morrison wasn't just offering her a business arrangement. He was offering her a partnership with a man who understood what it meant to work hard and take care of the people you loved. I think this might actually work, Jessica said, bouncing Lily gently as the baby started to get sleepy. I hope so, Caleb replied. And for the first time since she'd known him, he smiled like he actually meant it. That night, Jessica lay in her new bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her, Lily breathing peacefully in the next room, and Caleb's footsteps moving quietly through the house as he locked doors and turned off lights. For the first time in months, Jessica felt safe enough to sleep deeply, knowing that someone else was watching over her family and that tomorrow would bring stability instead of crisis. 2 months into their arrangement, Jessica began to notice small changes in their daily routine that felt less like a business partnership and more like something she was afraid to name. Caleb started coming home for lunch every day instead of eating alone in the fields. He would sit at the kitchen table while Jessica heated up soup or made sandwiches, and they would talk about Lily's latest achievements or discuss improvements to the ranch house. These conversations grew longer each day, stretching from 15 minutes to nearly an hour. Lily was thriving in ways that amazed Jessica every single day. The surgery to fix her reflux had been a complete success, covered entirely by Caleb's excellent health insurance. Without the constant pain, Lily had transformed from a crying, miserable baby into a happy, curious child who giggled when Caleb made funny faces and reached for him whenever he walked into the room. Jessica watched her daughter begin to crawl and babble, hitting every milestone she had missed during those terrible early months. She said, "Dada today," Jessica told Caleb one evening as they sat in the living room after dinner. Lily was on the floor between them, playing with wooden blocks Caleb had bought her the previous weekend. Caleb looked up from the ranch financial records he was reviewing, a smile spreading across his weathered face. "Did she really?" "3 times, Jessica confirmed, watching as Caleb got down on the floor with Lily and encouraged her to say it again. The sight of this big, strong man being so gentle with her daughter made Jessica's chest feel tight with an emotion she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The town had quickly accepted Jessica as Caleb's wife, and she found herself welcomed into a community she had only observed from the outside during her time at the diner. Mrs. Henderson introduced her to the church ladies group, and several ranch wives had stopped by with casseroles and advice about living in the countryside. Jessica realized that Caleb was more respected and liked than she had understood, and people seemed genuinely happy that he had found someone to share his life. One evening in late autumn, Caleb came home from checking the cattle with a cut on his forearm from a broken fence wire. Without thinking, Jessica immediately went to him, taking his arm to examine the wound. "You need to clean this properly," she said, leading him to the kitchen sink. As she washed the cut and applied antibiotic ointment, she became aware of Caleb watching her face with an intensity that made her suddenly self-conscious. "You don't have to take care of me," Caleb said quietly, but he didn't pull his arm away from her gentle touch. "I want to," Jessica replied, and realized as she said it that it was completely true. Somewhere along the way, caring for Caleb had stopped feeling like an obligation and started feeling like something she chose to do because it mattered to her whether he was hurt or comfortable. The moment stretched between them, and Jessica found herself looking up into Caleb's gray eyes, seeing something there that made her heart beat faster. They were standing close enough that she could smell his aftershave and feel the warmth radiating from his body. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, and for another second, she thought she might let him. Then Lily started crying from her playpen, and the spell was broken. Jessica stepped back, her cheeks burning, while Caleb cleared his throat and rolled down his sleeve. "Thank you," he said formally, and Jessica nodded, not trusting her voice to sound normal. That night, Jessica lay awake thinking about the way Caleb had looked at her and the way her body had responded to his nearness. This was supposed to be a temporary arrangement, a practical solution to both their problems. She wasn't supposed to start having feelings for her husband of convenience, and she certainly wasn't supposed to start imagining what it would be like if their marriage became real in every way. But as the weeks passed, Jessica found it harder and harder to ignore the growing attraction between them. Caleb would brush against her when they worked together in the kitchen, or his hand would linger on hers when he passed her something at dinner. The house felt charged with unspoken possibilities, and Jessica caught herself watching Caleb when he didn't know she was looking, admiring the way he moved with quiet confidence and the gentle way he interacted with Lily. One night, as they sat reading in the living room with Lily playing between them, Caleb looked up from his book and said, "Jessica, I think we need to talk about what's happening between us." Jessica's heart jumped into her throat. She had been dreading and hoping for this conversation in equal measure. "What do you mean?" she asked, even though she knew exactly what he meant. "I mean that this doesn't feel like a business arrangement anymore," Caleb said, setting down his book and looking at her directly. "At least not for me. I need to know if you feel it too, or if I'm imagining something that isn't there." Jessica looked at this man who had given her and Lily everything they needed to build a new life, who had been patient and kind and respectful of every boundary she had set. She thought about David, who had run away when things got difficult, and then she looked at Caleb, who had stepped up to help people he barely knew because it was the right thing to do. "I feel it too," Jessica admitted quietly, and saw relief in something that looked like joy cross Caleb's face. Jessica was hanging laundry on the line behind the ranch house when she saw the familiar blue pickup truck coming up the gravel driveway. Her heart dropped into her stomach as she recognized David behind the wheel, looking exactly the same as he had 6 months ago when he walked out on her and Lily. She quickly gathered the wet clothes back in a basket and hurried toward the house, hoping to get inside before he reached the front porch. "Jessica," David called out as he climbed out of his truck, slamming the door with the same aggressive force she remembered too well. "We need to talk." Jessica's hands were shaking as she opened the back door, but Caleb appeared in the kitchen before she could get inside. He must have seen David's truck from the window, because his face was set in hard lines and he positioned himself between Jessica and the door like a protective barrier. "You must be the new husband," David said with a sneer as he approached the porch. "I heard Jessica found herself a rich rancher to take care of her problems." "Smart move, sweetheart. Always didn't know how to land on your feet." "What do you want, David?" Jessica asked, trying to keep her voice steady while Lily played happily in her high chair, oblivious to the tension filling the room. David pushed past Caleb into the kitchen without being invited, looking around at the comfortable home with obvious jealousy. "I want to see my daughter. I have rights, you know. Just because you ran off and married some stranger doesn't mean you can keep Lily away from her real father." Caleb stepped closer to David, and Jessica could see the controlled anger in every line of his body. "You gave up your rights when you walked out on them," Caleb said in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "You left a sick baby and her mother with no money, no insurance, and no support. Lily doesn't even know who you are." "She's my blood," David shot back, his voice getting louder. "No judge in the world is going to let some cowboy play daddy to my kid when her real father wants to be involved in her life." Jessica felt panic rising in her chest. She had never legally terminated David's parental rights because she couldn't afford a lawyer, and she knew that biological fathers had strong legal standing in custody cases, even when they had abandoned their children. "You don't want to be a father," Jessica said, finding her voice. "You couldn't handle one night of crying, and now you want to come back and disrupt Lily's life? She's healthy and happy and settled. I won't let you hurt her again." David laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been talking to a lawyer, Jessica. Turns out I've had a pretty good case. Alienation of affection, parental interference, maybe even kidnapping charges since you moved her here without my permission. This rich boy might have money, but I've got legal rights. Caleb moved protectively closer to Jessica, and she could feel the solid warmth of his presence behind her. What do you really want? Caleb asked. Because this isn't about Lily. You never cared about her before. David's mask slipped for a moment, revealing the greed and desperation underneath. I want what's fair. Jessica landed herself a wealthy husband, and I deserve compensation for the child I gave her. $50,000, and I'll sign over my parental rights permanently. Otherwise, I'll see you both in court. Jessica felt like the room was spinning around her. David wasn't trying to get Lily back because he loved her or wanted to be a father. He was trying to blackmail them, using Lily as leverage to get money from Caleb's success. Get out, Caleb said, his voice deadly calm. Get out of my house, off my land, and away from my family. If you want a custody fight, you'll get one. But you won't get a penny from me, and you won't take Lily from the only stable home she's ever known. David's face turned red with anger. Your family? This isn't your family, cowboy. That's my daughter, and Jessica's just using you for your money. You think she actually cares about you? You're nothing but a meal ticket to her. The words hit Jessica like physical blows, not because they were true, but because she was terrified Caleb might believe them. She turned to look at Caleb, needing to see his face, needing to know that David's poison hadn't worked. Caleb was looking at her with steady gray eyes that held no doubt or suspicion, only quiet strength and determination. Lily is my daughter in every way that matters, Caleb said without taking his eyes off Jessica's face. And Jessica is my wife by choice, not necessity. We're a family, and families protect each other. David stormed toward the door, but turned back for one final threat. I'll be back with papers and a court order. Lily's coming with me, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. No judge will choose a stranger over a biological father. After David left, Jessica sank into a kitchen chair with tears streaming down her face. What if he's right? She whispered. What if a judge decides that biological parents automatically have more rights than adoptive ones? What if I lose her? Caleb knelt beside her chair and took her hands in his. That won't happen, he said firmly. We'll get the best lawyer in the state. We'll document everything. His abandonment, Lily's medical needs that he ignored, the stable home we've built together. No judge will send a healthy, happy child back to a man who walked away when she needed him most. But what if, Jessica started to say. No what ifs, Caleb interrupted gently. We're going to fight for our family, and we're going to win. I promise you that. Jessica looked into Caleb's determined face and felt some of her panic ease. She wasn't alone in this fight. She had a partner, a real husband who was willing to stand between her child and anyone who tried to hurt her. Our family, Jessica repeated. And for the first time since David's truck had appeared in their driveway, she allowed herself to believe they might actually be strong enough to protect what they had built together. The custody hearing took place on a cold February morning in the county courthouse, with Judge Martinez presiding over the case that had consumed Jessica's thoughts for 3 weeks. Caleb sat beside her at the plaintiff's table, wearing his best suit and holding her hand under the table while their lawyer, Patricia Wells, organized the evidence that would determine Lily's future. David's lawyer presented his case first, arguing that biological fathers had fundamental rights that couldn't be overridden by convenience or financial considerations. Mr. Mitchell may have made mistakes, the attorney said, but he's ready to step up and be the father his daughter deserves. He has steady employment and a genuine desire to be part of Lily's life. Jessica's stomach churned as she listened to David's testimony, watching him lie smoothly about his reasons for leaving and his supposed love for Lily. He claimed he had left because he was overwhelmed and needed time to mature, and that he now regretted his decision and wanted to make things right. It was their turn. Patricia Wells methodically destroyed David's credibility, presenting hospital records showing Lily's untreated medical condition during David's time in the home, bank records proving he had never paid a penny of child support, and phone records showing he had changed his number specifically to avoid Jessica's calls for help. Mrs. Morrison, Patricia said, using Jessica's married name. Can you tell the court about Lily's condition when her husband left? Jessica took a deep breath and spoke clearly about those terrible nights when Lily cried in pain while David complained and threatened to leave. She described the fear of losing her apartment, the terror of not being able to afford Lily's medical care, and the desperation that led her to accept help from a kind stranger. Caleb's testimony was brief but powerful. He spoke about the day he found Jessica and Lily in the hospital parking lot, about the surgery that had transformed Lily from a sick, crying baby into a healthy, happy toddler, and about the family they had built together through patience, love, and daily commitment. Your Honor, Caleb said, looking directly at the judge, Lily calls me Daddy. When she takes her first steps, she walks to me. When she's scared or hurt, she reaches for me. I didn't create her, but I chose her, and she chose me back. That's what makes a real father. The most powerful moment came when Patricia asked Lily to be brought into the courtroom. At 18 months old, Lily was walking confidently and babbling constantly. When she saw the crowded room full of strangers, she immediately looked around for familiar faces. Her eyes passed right over David without recognition, but when she spotted Caleb, she broke into a huge smile and toddled directly toward him, arms outstretched, saying "Dada" over and over. Judge Martinez watched this interaction carefully, then asked David to call Lily over to him. David tried everything, making funny faces, offering toys, calling her name, but Lily stayed firmly attached to Caleb, hiding her face against his shoulder when David tried to approach. Mr. Mitchell, Judge Martinez said sternly, you abandoned this child when she was sick and vulnerable. You provided no financial support, no medical care, and no emotional presence in her life. Meanwhile, Mr. Morrison stepped up to provide everything Lily needed: medical care, financial stability, and most importantly, consistent love and protection. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. David's parental rights were permanently terminated due to abandonment and failure to support his child. Caleb's petition to legally adopt Lily was approved immediately. Lily Morrison was officially and legally their daughter. 3 months later, Jessica stood in their living room wearing a white dress she had bought with her own money from her job at the diner, which she had kept because she enjoyed the work and the community connections. Caleb wore the same suit he had worn to court, but this time his smile was relaxed and genuine as Pastor Williams conducted the ceremony that would make their marriage real in their hearts as well as on paper. Lily toddled around the room in a tiny yellow dress, charming the gathered neighbors and friends who had supported them through the custody battle. Mrs. Henderson had closed the diner for the afternoon so everyone could attend, and even Judge Martinez had come to wish them well. During their vows, Jessica looked into Caleb's gray eyes and spoke from her heart. You gave me your name when I had nothing to offer in return. You gave Lily a father when her real father walked away. You gave us both a home, a family, and a future we never could have imagined. Caleb's voice was steady but emotional as he replied, you gave me a reason to come home every day. You turned my house into a home and made me understand what it means to be needed and wanted. Lily gave me the chance to be a father, and you gave me the chance to be a real husband. As they kissed to seal their real marriage, Lily clapped her little hands and shouted "Dada," loud enough to make everyone laugh. Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home and Lily was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Jessica and Caleb sat together on their front porch swing, watching the sunset over their land. No regrets? Caleb asked, holding Jessica close against his side. Jessica thought about David, who had disappeared from their lives as quickly as he had returned. She thought about the desperate woman she had been just 1 year ago and the confident wife and mother she had become. She thought about Lily, healthy and happy, and legally theirs forever. None at all, Jessica said, meaning it completely. This is exactly where we belong. Their love story had begun with desperation and a business arrangement, but it had grown into something real and lasting through daily kindness, mutual respect, and the shared commitment to building a family worth protecting. Lily would grow up knowing she was chosen, wanted, and deeply loved by two people who had found each other when they both needed rescuing. And they all lived happily ever after, just as the best love story should end.